Good evening, good evening, members. I don't know if that's any better. Right, good evening. Right, that's no better. Hello.
Yeah. Gee.
Oh, that one. Oh. Hello.
It's still bad. Hello.
to the introduction of weight and width limits to assist in this issue. And the answer that has been provided to me by Kent Highways is as follows, members. When highways officers assess an environmental HGV restriction, many factors are considered, one of which being if there are suitable alternative routes for HGVs to take. We have a duty to ensure businesses and residents can access the services they need and receive deliveries. It must be recognised that the economy needs to be supported, which means that local companies will sometimes use smaller roads to continue their businesses. If there are no suitable alternative routes for HGVs to take, then restricting certain roads will not be a viable option. For environmental HGV restrictions, an exception for vehicles gaining access to properties within the restricted area is always included. This creates further issues as access is not well defined in law and therefore can be rendered unenforceable. Any restriction should largely be self-enforcing and its reason should be obvious to drivers and not cause them significant inconvenience or cost. Only Kent Police have the powers to enforce such restrictions, but they may not be willing for its officers to spend significant time on this. Non-environmental width limits may be used on roads physically incapable of accommodating larger vehicles. The maximum width permitted in imperial units should be 6 inches less than the narrowest part of the road, rounded to the nearest 6 inches downwards. Typically, a 6-foot 6-inch restriction is used. Looking at Detling specifically, it is noted that HGV restrictions have been requested for Pilgrim's Way and Hocker's Lane. In the case of Pilgrim's Way, there are no suitable alternative routes for HGVs to use, as each route is equally as narrow. Officers would then need to restrict each road in the area whilst allowing an exception for access. This would then have little effect on HGV movements, as vehicles would still be able to use Pilgrim's Way for access and would have no incentive to take another route. In the case of Hocker's Lane, there are businesses that require HGV access, and therefore an exemption for access would need to be included. Due to the aforementioned issues with the legal definition of what access is, this would not be a suitable scheme to pursue. It is noted, however, that officers have offered an alternative scheme in the form of positive HGV directional signage. Thank you very much for bearing with me. That was quite a lengthy answer. I am unable to take a supplementary from members of the committee. I'm sorry about that.
Point of order, could we have that distributed? Because
of course,
I'll be honest, it's still very difficult to hear you. It's taken all my energy to hear what you're saying.
It's absolutely fine. I don't have a reputation for not being heard, so that is coming as somewhat of a surprise, but I will ensure, the acoustics in here are particularly bad, and this evening they're even worse. I will ensure that that is distributed to members of the committee and the lady who has submitted the question. That now concludes the question and answer session from members of the public. There are no questions, I hope, from members of the committee to the chairman. No, there aren't. So that takes us on very neatly to item number 12, which is the work programme. The work programme is for noting. Councillor Chittenden.
Comment on one of them.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I would refer you to
Thank you very much, Councillor Chittenden, and I have to say I share your frustration. When I chaired SPI in this council and when I was the cabinet member, I was able to telephone Carol Williams, and within a few minutes of asking her, she was able to tell me exactly how much was in cell pots. It seems that such a streamlined system doesn't exist at Kent County Council, and it is often cited that it is difficult to calculate things which are split between both authorities. Now, I am not necessarily advocating that as a decent excuse, but that is the gist of the correspondence that I've been included in, and Jordan has certainly been chasing this to ensure that it is brought to our attention as soon as possible. And you're absolutely right, it will have been a year since it was requested, assuming we are to get it in the new year. Yeah. I didn't think for one moment you were. I was just clarifying that perhaps there are some parties who are more to blame than others. Councillor Jeffrey next.
Thank you, Chair. Can I make a suggestion for a couple of additional items to the forward plan, perhaps? We've just had two excellent questions from members of the public. I'm not convinced that everybody in this committee was comfortable with the answers. And as you rightly point out, we are unable to debate the answers and the issues that from members members of the public that are raised. So perhaps we could add both of those questions to the forward plan and ask KCC to provide some reports that we could then debate at a future committee.
That's a proposal that is seconded. So I think the proposal is, if I can just sort of find a form of words that that we can all agree on, that you can agree on. There is a proposal on the table to bring to request two agenda items specifically relating to each of the questions that we've had this evening. That is proposed by Councillor Jeffrey, and I think we just about got there in time to second Councillor Clark. So as there is a proposal on the table, we need to speak specifically to that. I can't imagine that anyone really does have much to say on that. Is that agreed, members, that we will request that as a agreed? Fine. And I then will go back. There was another comment on from Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. That's very much what I was thinking of doing. So you got there before me. I did want to say one thing about I know we're going to talk about that on a paper on the work programme, but we had a really impacting four-way traffic lights at Borton Lane, Cripple Street that absolutely crippled that network. It was a water leak. We got the lights in place, which crippled everything. We got the road dug up, and when they got to the point at the source of the water, they found the pipe was good, and there was no chlorine in the water that was running. Now, why on earth we got to the point of a four-way temporary light situation, digging down into the road, and then we found it. And I got that from South East Water directly. That I spoke to the actual programme chat, and they said, unfortunately, we got to the point where we saw the flooding water in the ground, it had no chlorine, so it was ground source water. So we went through an awful lot of pain for that. Maybe we need to have a process where if there's any report of water, it gets tested before we do any of that programming. But I've thoroughly endorsed that. The other question I was going to say was really it's following up with Ian's point, Councillor Chittenden's point. We can talk about this on the ITS, but at the end of the day, we are talking about some major junctions which are either being considered to be downgraded from our original aspiration. We had previously seen the amounts of money that had been collected from developers and SELAP, and we really do need, you know, it's a real hot topic to find out what's going on with that money. Not just where is it gone, but if we do what we're planning to do, which there's an implication that we're doing something with money if we if we scale things back, what do we lose? Do we get to the point where some of that money we just give it back to the developer because they said that no, we committed to this scheme, you're now saying you're not going to do it, or can we be flexible with it? So that's my concern as part of that that's coming back to us.
So I appreciate your comment. Perhaps that might be best asked when we specifically get to the item on the agenda. Members, no one else has indicated to speak. I assume that the work programme is noted along with the proposal, which was unanimously accepted. Noted.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, members. I'm now going to deviate from the scripted agenda, and we're going to move directly to item number 15, which is the agenda item request from Councillor Clark. So I'm just, who is going to be introducing this? Councillor Clark, yeah. Councillor Clark, over to you. The floor is yours.
So my area of my ward area changed in May. I used to be my area used to be North Lewes, and it used to be Tovel, otherwise known as South. It's now Lewes and Linton. North Lewes is combined with Lewes to make a larger parish, so that whole ward is parished by Lewes and also Linton. Meeting with them early on, talking about their aspirations, both of those parishes expressed a desire to get a 30-mile a speed limit to 30 miles from the viaduct in Lewes to the village in Linton, and it was loud and clear from the parishes. I asked what had been done in terms of surveying residents, and there really was very minimal amount of work that had been done on that front. So what I really wanted to do was find out, if we were going to go down this route, what do residents say? We went all the way down, as I say, that whole corridor and the side roads, so Harts Crescent, McAlpine Crescent, Carmers Close, etc. In total we got a response of well, I haven't actually, the total numbers I've got are, let me see, 126, 132, 133 responses. 126 of those were for reduction, and some of those responses were very vocal, and they included a lot of comments and suggestions. We had 2 that were against the proposal. I'm sorry, 6 that were against the proposal, and 1 person that said that they found they were neutral. Now, I think that's quite an overwhelming amount of support, and I think if we're going to do community-led initiatives on this board, we have that support from the parish and now the residents. And I just wanted to give a little bit more information, because ultimately this plan is to submit this to KCC for a report to come back to this board. But I wanted to just point out a couple of things that came back when I was looking through. It's a 40-mile limit. People along McAlpine Crescent and Salts Avenue were raising the fact that there's no 30 when you go into those side roads. So technically they're covered, all of those roads down that corridor are covered by a 40-mile limit. It's especially bad on Rosemount Close between Old Lewes Hill and Linton Road, because people come out onto a T-junction, and very often people are going very fast, and they can do it with impunity because it's a 40-mile limit. Another thing that came up is residents said that they would like the opportunity to park outside of their houses of a night time, and that may actually help with the attenuation of traffic in terms of bringing the speed down. In Cox Heath, you have those build-outs which are costly, unpopular, but currently nobody is allowed to park along that corridor without their lights on overnight. And what's the suggestions come forward that if they were allowed to park outside, that might actually, it may not necessarily bring anything to a halt because there's space on the road to do it, but it could effectively bring down the traffic, the surveys when they do the speed counts. I've mentioned they've got the residents and the parish support. Both Lewes and Linton. I went to meetings. I went to a meeting on Monday, one at Lewes, which was their environment committee, in which they specifically said they wanted that on their hip. They previously had it, and they want to make sure that's something that's front and centre. I went to Linton after that, and the transport part of their full council, they came back to me to say that we really do want this. They both have significant SIL money on hand. So if this is something that's going to cost money, it's not necessarily going to cost the county, because they would like to put their own money forward for this. And there's also a planning application that went through, somewhat controversial planning application on the Heath Road. And as part of that, there is a developer contribution that's been agreed, and it's a condition of planning to put to extend the 30-mile limit from Coxheath to 300 metres to the east of Linton Crossroads. So we're already looking at implementing along that network a 30-mile scheme. So I'm just going to leave it at that at this point. I'm going to submit this to KCC, and I would hope that the board will support me in requesting that a paper come back to this board. Thank you, Chairman. So I'm proposing that.
Thank you very much. Fabulous. I would have seconded otherwise. So members, this is a very technical item in front of us. It is very much about whether we want a report or not. I don't want to get bogged down in the merits of whether or not we have 30 miles per hour. I suspect that's for another night. My suspicion looking around the room is that no one is possibly going to disagree with this, but does anyone have anything that they do wish to say on the matter? In that case, it is moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Higson. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Unanimous. Fabulous. I hope to see that on an agenda in the new year at our next meeting. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Clark. So we next move on to agenda item 13, which is the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, which is going to be, as far as I'm aware, introduced by Barry Stiff and Lee Birchall, who are attending virtually. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Brilliant.
Chairman, can you hear us okay?
We're loud and clear.
Okay, it's just we've had some sound problems hearing you throughout the meeting. So
Yeah, please alert us if you can't hear us for any reason. It was only during some of the questions that the sound failed.
Thank you. We hear you loud and clear, gentlemen.
okay. So I just want to understand, Chairman, how you'd like me to. Would you like a full update on the report or a brief summary, and then we go to questions?
I think a summary is best. This is probably the item on the agenda upon which we're most interested, and if anyone's going to read anything in this agenda, it'll be this item. So a very high level overview would be great. I'll try my best, but I'm sure there will be plenty of questions for you regardless.
That's fine. Thank you, Chairman. So just starting the sequence there in the reports. So first update is on Bearsted Road. We've recently started a new re-procurement process. It's in the early stages. We've issued selection questionnaires to enable us to shortlist up to 6 contractors to provide prices for the full tender. That's currently being returned this Monday, and we're due to assess that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, with the expectation of issuing a full tender in early November, which, subject to receiving acceptable price, we would hope to be in a position to award a contract in spring 2025, so around towards the end of April. And we're looking at a programme of approximately 13 months to complete the works, which I think is as previously reported on other updates. We are we originally were carrying out landscape as part of the contract. We've now extracted that from that contract. We'll be appointing a separate contractor purely for landscaping. And we'll be looking at carrying out some of the crematorium and planting, which is still outstanding over this winter. So we've completed some neighbouring works, as you will probably be aware. That included the drainage outfall into the crematorium and some enabling works to form the junction into off of Newnham Court Way. Regarding Junction 7, we're currently reviewing the proposals, and we're trying to find a solution that aligns with the new recently approved local plan, and also considering the impacts now that the M2 Junction 5 is now fully open, and that is having a difference in how the traffic is now approaching Junction 7. It's now effectively a free flow junction, enabling that traffic to join the 249 much quicker. There's a number of approvals we need to go through with National Highways, so we've started some early engagement with National Highways to consider those proposals, and then any solution that we're able to provide will be taken forward at the conclusion of the Bearsted Road scheme. Moving on to Cold Harbour Roundabout. We awarded the contract in February to Brahini Civil Engineering Limited. Works started with vegetation clearance, with quite a negative press interest at the time, with removal of the trees. Unfortunately, that was, it's one of the requirements for our major projects, is the impact on vegetation, but there will be further landscaping planting going in, and hopefully an enhanced landscaping scheme will be provided. So we're now on programme to complete the works in early December. We're currently in the process of completing the final surfacing, and there's a series of nighttime road closures in place to carry out that works. I say landscaping is due to start in early November, and there'll be other finishing works around signage, road markings, and removal of the site compound and reinstating the Royal British Legion field prior to returning it to its condition prior to us taking occupation. As advised previously in other JTBs, the Hall Road roundabout proposal is not being taken forward, and we are still working on a solution to try and solve the flooding problem that occurs outside home base. But to try and mitigate that, we've increased the maintenance regime, and I believe that the soakaway chambers are due for some maintenance in the next week or two. Moving on to the Blues Road junction with Sutton Road, the Wheatsheaf junction. There was a meeting held back in March with that Lee and myself attended, with Helen Grant, Helen Waitley, yourself, Mr. Chairman, other Maidstone Borough councillors and residents, and our cabinet member Neil Baker. We committed to continuing monitoring of that junction until September, so there's a 12-month period post permanent closure of the junction, having also been closed for a previous 18 months during the experimental TRO. We've now provided a report that was attached to the JTB paper that summarises the traffic assessment and impacts and proposals of what we plan to do going forward. So I won't go into too much detail about the report, because that information is there for everyone to read, and just a few headline figures from it. The queues that were experienced in the AM peak, there's been significant improvement since the before surveys prior to the closure and the post surveys, and that's continued as a common theme through the 4 surveys that we've carried out. The PM peak is slightly different. There's not been a significant improvement, but that we believe is down to the nature of the PM peak being different in nature to how traffic operates in a morning peak, but the periods in the PM peak are fairly consistent with the pre-closure queues. As we've reported in previous updates, the closure of Cranbourne, which was always a requirement of the full scheme, we believed delivered significant benefit, which is why we took the approach to close it as a trial experimental TRO, so we could assess how it performed, and then to be able to consider whether the full junction improvement was worthy of taking forward. We've also considered the impacts at Plains Avenue. That's been reviewed as part of the report, because comments were received post closure of additional queuing and traffic using Plains Avenue. It's probably no surprise that traffic has increased slightly, because that is the obvious route for motorists to take, but significantly queues have not shown a marked increase from the pre-closure condition. Road safety has been a topic of discussion and feedback from residents and reported in the press. But we've analysed the data received, and there's no trend suggesting that the closure of Cranbourne Avenue has contributed to any of the collisions that have occurred. One particular one that was reported for near the Plains Avenue junction involved two vehicles travelling northbound into Maidstone, where a vehicle in lane 1 decided to turn right into Plains Avenue and collided with a vehicle. Clearly, completely driver error was a main factor for that collision. So, in conclusion, in terms of the traffic safety, we don't believe that the closure has impacted traffic safety, and if anything, the closure of Cranbourne has improved, or is not making the condition any worse, but it has improved probably pedestrian safety and cycle safety at that junction by removing an arm onto the junction. So turning to the actual report itself, and the recommendation regarding the scheme to take forward, we considered the 2 minimum, which is the retain the closure of Cranbourne with some enhancements to the signals, so upgrading signals to near-sided signals, and also moving the stop line an island that sits north of the Cranbourne Avenue junction. That will reduce the green times because we're able to move the stop lines closer. So we're currently looking at programming that works. Oh, sorry, apologies, I didn't summarise. So the do maximum scheme was assessed. That is delivering the full scheme, the demolition of the Wisheath pub and complete reconfiguration of the junction. But on assessment of the additional benefit that would be gained from that improvement over and above the benefit that's been achieved by the closure of Cranbourne, the benefits are relatively minor in providing additional benefit, noting the considerable cost it would take to deliver the scheme and also the disruption during the construction of the project. So the recommendation was made to the Cabinet member to take forward a do minimum scheme, which is to retain the closure of Cranbourne and to provide the minor enhancements that I discussed. And that's been confirmed by the Cabinet member to now proceed with that do minimum scheme. I'll just move on to some of the other projects. So included this just for completeness, but as been reported in other J2B updates, Armstrong Road has been completed, and we're aware of some issues travelling northbound in terms of the queues, but I think it's improved traffic travelling southbound in terms of providing that right turn lane into Armstrong Road, but it will be a junction that is being monitored by our ITS team. Shields Crescent, we've considered the improvement, which was primarily a road marking and signage change to alter the priorities to provide unobstructed movement for traffic travelling southbound to turn right into Shields Crescent. One of the consequences of the scheme would be to remove one of the lanes travelling northbound from Armstrong Road towards Shields Crescent to enable that merge to happen without conflicting with other vehicles. So in balance, we considered that change would have a negative impact by removing the capacity on that northbound approach into the town. So consequently, we've decided that a scheme will not be taken forward. There's also a risk of collisions with weaving traffic. So as the two lanes merge, normally you'd have quite a long length of carriageway for vehicles to be able to merge. But as they're joining, there's a risk that at the moment they're controlled as they join from travelling southbound. But there is a risk that if they aren't controlled without a give way, that it could lead to the potential for more collisions. So moving on to the Cripple Street Borton Lane junction, as again previously reported in J2B updates, and it's just provided for a bit of context. That scheme is not proceeding. It wasn't palatable to elected members previously to lose the green space and the trees that were required for the widening. So that is a project that's not been taken forward. The A20 Winnington Street, we are in discussions with Amy, our term maintenance contractor, to deliver that project. And we're currently looking at a programme that will allow construction to start in early 2025. We're engaging with utility companies at the moment to finalise the diversions required, because there's a few services that are affected. And we've updated ecology surveys, and we are currently planning some of the vegetation clearance that needs to take part within Moat Park. And we've been liaising with the Moat Park manager to agree those aspects of the works and the future programme. Moving on to 826 Tunbridge Road, junction with Fountain Lane. We've engaged with Project Centre as the consultant on our framework to review the design work that was previously undertaken. We are concerned there's a number of safety and design issues that will impact on the deliverability of the previously identified double roundabout scheme. So we're now exploring other alternative options to see what can be brought forward at that junction. We're mindful that it is a busy area for cyclists and pedestrians, and it's not the best junction for those users at the moment, so we're conscious that we don't want to disadvantage those further. So we've given a briefing to our cabinet member, and we will provide a formal update to local councillors and a J2B at the next meeting. A274 Sutton Road, junction Williamson Street. Again, the original design that was proposed was, following public consultation and discussion with local councillors, was again not palatable due to the loss of green space. So the original proposal was not able to come forward. There is further work we need to do to explore the design options that are available, but potentially they would not provide the same benefits as the original scheme would provide. But as that is funded through Section 106 money that is not time constrained, that is sort of a lower priority in terms of the priority in delivering the funded scheme. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that's sort of concluded a summary of the project updates. Don't know if you want to invite questions or if you want to ask any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. First and foremost, I'm going to ask our visiting member, Councillor Cleator, if she wishes to speak, and then I will start working through the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as my colleague with myself has been working a lot on this, the A229 Lewes Junction Road, closure of Cranbourne, and the A274 Wheatshift Junction. So Councillor Clark unfortunately has had to leave, but I know he's got one of his constituents who has been in contact with everyone. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going, Brian, sorry.
That was Councillor Sands.
I was getting too excited about getting up to speak. What can I say? But we know that the situation in Lewes Road hasn't improved, and it isn't someone who's sitting there for an hour just taking the log. It's some residents who live there. In terms of the data, and that the Cranbourne Avenue has created additional capacity within the junction, that's really great, because I can tell you where they're all going. They're all driving through the Shetway estate. That's what's happening, to try and get away from there, to move away. So there are a number of issues there where people are trying to come the other way round rather than go through there. So I do call into question that there's the data that's being had on this, because clearly what we're hearing from our residents doesn't gel with what the data said. So I'll be interested to know what was actually observed, what was actually a desktop review on a spreadsheet, because they're two different things, and more importantly, how much have we paid for all of this as taxpayers as part of our council tax. In terms of, and I will leave Councillor Wilkinson to deal with the rest because she's been leading for this, but there was a lot of publicity when the Wheatsheaf pub actually closed, so I'm presuming we bought that for the road scheme that was going to get demolished, which was a very much wanted community asset that we've given up, and yet again we have a road scheme that changes. I'm old enough in the tooth to remember when I first started working for KCC many moons ago. I don't now. Kingsley Avenue, Melville Road, all of them, we bought them for the Inner Ring Road scheme. Campbell, Foster Street, all of them. I know, because I used to collect the rent on them. And yet they were never used. So I have a real issue when we're purchasing properties with public money that we'll probably sell at a loss again, or it'll be turned into an HMO, which I'm sure I'll look forward to the delights of that on planning. But I get really frustrated coming to these meetings where we hear a lot of figures, get told to note a report, and actually some of the time you need to be listening to what the residents are telling you, what elected members of all parties are telling you, and yet we never ever get that. So the other issue I would just like to briefly touch on so I don't speak again, there's mention elsewhere of the new roundabout at the Running Horse, which is absolutely great as long as you're not trying to get out of Forstall Road, because that's just completely clogged all the time. But the issue that I feel is we're being given this data, which is hardly accessible, by the way, because I couldn't read it. And we are having a lot of money spent on outside consultants to deliver this, when actually we have a highways department. And I'm old enough to remember when the highways department had its own work teams that did all this work. It seems to me we're paying more and getting less. The residents in Shetway and on Lewes Road feel very, very angry that they're not being listened to. We all know we got our 76 seconds speedier transport through Fairmeadow after the absolute chaos that went on there, which is now being eaten up. But I'm just really, really heart sick of having to go back to residents and saying, you're not being listened to. No one's taking any notice of what you say. A desktop review's being done. We spent a lot of your money to come up with figures and data that quite clearly, again, and I'm grateful you've come online, but Invicta House ain't that far from here, and you actually could have come, and I would have.
I'm going to stop you now, Councillor Cleater. I'm going to stop you now. First and foremost, I didn't appreciate your thinly veiled reference suggesting that some people had been manipulating data. I do not think.
Sorry, I didn't say manipulating data.
It was a Councillor Cleater, if you would let me finish. I did not appreciate your thinly veiled reference suggesting that people were manipulating data. We allow the data to manipulate our opinions, not the other way around. And I am not going to allow you to criticise officers because they're not in this room. I think we will leave it there.
I did not accuse anyone of manipulating data. My question is how much was spent on obtaining that data. That's my anger, because we've used outside consultants. I think that's legitimate, Councillor Cooper, and I'll finish now because others will want to speak on various.
I think we have heard enough. Thank you. Right, thank you very much. And just for the record, members, we are here to have a robust challenge of views, but we are not going to be making accusations to officers or other councillors. And I think that is very important that we debate in that style, members. I'm going to ask the first question, if I may, and then I do have a list of people wishing to speak. So paragraph 2.71, as reported at previous JTB reports, this scheme is not proceeding as it was not palatable to elected members to lose the green space for the proposed widening in front of the parade of shops. Consequently, this scheme will not be included in future JTB updates. Now, that's relating to the Cripple Street Bolton Lane junction. Can I just confirm sort of precisely which elected members that's referring to, and at what point this decision was made? Because I found out about that first time a few days ago and I read this report pack.
I'll take it. Possible. We will have to look back. As you know, with this scheme, there was various meetings held in regards to the benefit of the scheme and what was proposed. It came away from several meetings. I think it was presented at the JTB that a consensus on the appropriate scheme couldn't be found. We had working group meetings, I think, as well, with the leader of the council at the time. But yes, certainly be grateful if we could come back with some further detail on that to confirm.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate that. And just for the benefit of members in the room who couldn't hear my original question, it was in relation to the junction at Cripple Street and at the parade of shops, where the Swan is, if that makes sense. The report says that it's no longer going ahead. Next, so first to speak, I've got Councillor Springett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got 5 points, but 3 of them are really quick, so it sounds horrendous. The first one is on the Bearsted Road scheme. As you would imagine, that's my patch. You've said you sent out a a questionnaire, and that was supposed to be returned by Monday. How many questionnaires have you had returned? In other words, how much interest have you had come back from that questionnaire?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Springer. We've had 13 expressions of interest from the market.
Okay, thank you. When you go out to tender, will the tender be for the same works that were previously tendered for? Because my concerns are that either the work is going to be reduced or something is going to be cut out, or we're actually going for a tender that was done 2-ish, 3-ish years ago, and we're trying to get it for cheaper. And everything's gone up. So I'm a little concerned that we might actually struggle. And I wondered, so there's 2 questions. Are we going out for the same work when we go out for tender, when you go out for tender? And what happens if either nobody tenders or the tenders come back higher than they were?
So we are still delivering the same scheme. So obviously we met with you before, Councillor Springer, and it's still the same project that we've discussed previously, which is a dualling between the 2 roundabouts and signalising and of both roundabouts and enlarging the New Cut Road roundabout, plus the internal link roads within the Newnham Court development. So nothing has changed in terms of the project itself. What we have been doing over the last few weeks is to try and hone in on some of the key risks to the project. Utilities is one of those, and we've employed a specialist consultant who've got history and links with many of the with all the utility companies that are affected, and that is to ensure that the information that's within the contract documents is as robust as it can be, and to try and mitigate any delays when we're on site. So it's really to try and enhance the documentation we've got gone out to tender, but it is the same scheme that's been delivered. So did I answer most questions, or was there another one? Apologies.
Yeah, it was what happens if it comes out more expensive than last time.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, can you say?
That's a really good question, Councillor Springer. It's obviously as part of the query from the last meeting in terms of spend. This is outside of the SELEP funding, but we have external funding. This is slightly different in the fact that there's no Section 106 or shall we say extensive Section 106 match funding alongside this. So any potential increase in the scheme costs would have to be covered by KCC, which obviously we will have to review against the existing financial situation the council finds itself in. So can't really answer it until we know what the kind of budget envelope is in relation to that tender price that's been returned. So yeah, it's not an easy one to answer at the moment.
The only thing I'll add to what we said is, in terms of the market, we've engaged with a number of the contractors who've previously expressed an interest, and we know that there are a substantial number who are keen to deliver this project. So that is a positive, in terms that we've got engagement with the market and they want to tender for the project.
Certainly.
That is a little bit reassuring, I have to say, because I am a little concerned. With the Junction 7 improvements, I always thought motorways and junctions were within the remit of national highways, but are they expecting KCC to pay for this, or are they contributing in any way?
So the roundabout junction itself is a KCC asset. So the national highways jurisdiction ends at the top of the slip roads. They have responsibility of the structures over the motorway, but in terms of maintenance of the junction and responsibility, it is down to KCC. So any improvements that affect the motorway, we've got to obviously agree and engage with National Highways, and it's quite often a long drawn out process.
Can I just come in? Sorry, just to answer in terms of the funding though, let's bring it. It's a good question. The original scheme proposal was on the cards for many years. There were many failed bids to government and to National Highways themselves, as well as to reach the, to achieve funding for the much needed improvements. And as I say, this has come through, see, 2 of Maidstone's local plans, which is unfortunate really, because certainly we would look to National Highways to support us in any funding that we can achieve. So it's just unfortunately a nature of the way transport schemes are funded.
Thank you. I've got 2 very quick points and then I'll shut up. Thank you for that. The Wheatsheaf Junction, I do have to say, does concern me. We've got a minimal improvement in the morning and what sounds like no improvement, or actually a worsening situation in the evening. So where do we go with that? Or are we actually going to admit that we've reached the end of the road for any improvements in that area? Because if we're starting to get to a saturation point, I think we need KCC to be very big and bold and say that. So that's my last one. One more question off this and then I'll shut up. Thank you. So what's next for the Wheatsheaf?
So I think, the challenge we face nowadays is we're working with a very constrained highway network. Maidstone's not alone. Many places across the country that experience the same thing. It's very difficult to provide the additional capacity without some radical solutions. And unfortunately, with the proposed scheme, although it involved demolition of Wheatsheaf, it didn't actually secure enough land to provide that capacity, just because of the configuration of the roads. We've looked at the analysis of the figures, and just to pick up a point earlier, we have used a local consultant who knows the area to provide the most recent update, and we collect data by cameras. It's reviewed in the office, but they've been on site, they've monitored things on the ground. We've even had drone videos so they can understand how the traffic flows. So it's very much a hands-on, not a desktop assessment. But in terms of next steps, it's refining the signals to enhance as much as we can within the constraints of the highway. I think in terms of that term saturation, there's more and more housing being built on constrained network, and this is one of many junctions throughout Maidstone that struggles with the lack of space to really provide an improvement. Cold Harbour, for example, there's land available. We're able to make a radical change, and that hopefully we'll see a big improvement at that junction. But we're not so fortunate within the town centre environment where it's so constrained.
Thank you. That just leads on to my final point. So you're saying it's difficult to provide additional capacity. So is that approaching something called severe? Because we're just about to review our local plan, which is going to make us provide more housing. So if we start with, it looks to me like we're actually starting to get saturation point at several junctions. So can you reassure me and give me some confidence that when the next local plan process goes through, that KCC will actually use this for these situations and these junctions to evidence severe congestion or severe impact on the road network, so that we actually have some evidence to perhaps reduce our housing numbers that will be attempted to be imposed on us. So I'm just asking for a little bit of confidence, please. To me, this is now approaching severe in some places, but everybody says, oh, you can't evidence. How do you prove it? Well, I think this might be getting there. So please, can I make a plea to KCC and the powers that be to perhaps use some of this evidence to argue that Maidstone's full? Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's noted, Councillor. I think it's other teams within KC that deal with that, so we make the relevant officers aware.
Thank you very much, and I'll go quiet now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me.
Let's just be careful what we wish for, Councillor Spring, otherwise they'll make us build them somewhere else where we might not want them. Next on the list is Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from that point, actually, it's a real shame that going back to 2017 when we had an adopted local plan, and even leading up to that when we were collecting all of this money from CELEP and deciding what was going to come from developers, it's a real shame that we didn't have a feedback from the highways that there wasn't enough space at the wheat sheaf, because I kind of feel like we went through 7 years of coming to these meetings, looking at these quite elaborate plans for reconfiguration. The pub's been built. There's been 2 levels of hearings on the local plan review, and I've heard the local plan inspector say, oh, we've got this quantum of housing, but we do have this mitigation. And in this evening's meeting, a bunch of those things have just been said, they'll no longer be progressed or on this report. So even earlier this year, we had a transport delivery plan from the borough that went out for a further consultation from the government inspector. And there were, in that plan, there were elaborate parts of this ITS, including the reconfiguration of the wheat sheaf, and the government inspector was looking for feedback on that. Now, I really feel that KCC at that time, if things were a little bit, if the pencils were sharper, they could have come in and said, just to let you know, this isn't going to happen, that isn't going to happen. And I think that might have actually changed the whole sort of momentum of those hearings on the quantum of housing. In terms of what I mentioned earlier about the money, there are schemes on this plan or on this paper that we're being asked for them to be removed. Basically, we're noting, we're not deciding, I guess. But this will not be on a future paper. This will not be on a future paper. Now, anyone that's looking at assessing a multi-million-pound project in their own lives would, if you were to say to them, this is what's going on with this project, but we won't let you know about the money until January, I don't think any of us would actually make decisions about dropping things when we just don't know what the position is with money. Now, several years ago, we had quite a big breakdown, which was it was very helpful, and it gave the amount of money that had been collected at these various junctions. I think the wheat sheaf was 3.85 million. Now, it's one thing in this report to say, there isn't the cost benefit to go forward with anything great if you're using your own money, and that's money that's coming out of your own budget. But if we've secured that money, and we won't know until January, but if we've secured that money purely if we move forward with the junction improvement and we find out in January that we've got to give it back because now we scuppered it in October, that's not good value for money. That might change the way we look at it. Are we going to lose all of that money, or is that just going to be money that we won't have to spend from our own budgets? I really feel that we're making some big sweeping announcements about junctions in this paper, and we don't know anything about the money. I just find that absolutely bizarre. In terms of the Cripple Street junction, it's helpful that the chairman has brought that forward, because a scheme came forward. It did come to this board. It maybe you may not have been present on that one. It may not have been when you were you were present in the board, but it did come to this board. And if members were to remember, if I give you a brief outline about that, it basically took the green space outside of the parade. Now, when you're coming south towards Sainsbury's, you've got lights at Sainsbury's. So if you take that green space out, almost all of that extra land is between the two lights. Now, most residents, and I think most reasonable people who know that area, know that when you've got past those lights at Sainsbury's, there is absolutely no problem getting into Borton Lane. And the idea of spending all this money taking the green space out just seemed to be folly. But that wasn't to say that anyone that reviewed that said, let's cancel this project. That was feedback on a scheme that involved, I see Sean Carter, North Lewes Residents Association. So they came back with a whole number of suggestions as to what could be done with the £1 million that was being allocated there. Let's come back to the money. And unfortunately, nothing else, because that scheme was considered to have its challenges, we lost the whole junction. And I find that's not really how developer contribution works. If you collected money for something and you said we need it, that really needs to be assessed very carefully before you cancel a scheme. Things like Shields Crescent, let's come back to Shields Crescent. When you go past Armstrong Road heading north, there's only one lane. And we've seen roadworks on that section down to Southborough School where they've closed a lane and it flows better. Officers have even said that in the past when this first came to us, and that could give us options. We only need one lane if we've only got one lane feeding into it, but that might give us some options to put some buffer space around the school, perhaps make a nicer environment around the school, maybe give ourselves some space to put a speed camera there. But just to say we're going to cancel it when we've actually got it, we've got money against it, which we won't know until January, I just find that unacceptable. We could even use some of that extra lane that we don't need because only one lane goes through to lengthen the turn into Armstrong Road at some point. But I just feel we haven't bottomed that one out. And my last couple of points are to do with some of the tactics that I feel we lose when we look at the big picture. But Plains Avenue, we talked about lines on Plains Avenue, extending those lines. At the time I was a member, I used the devolved budget to put those lines in. Officers have said to us that it would be a significant improvement if we could extend them further into Plains Avenue. So we should be doing that. Whatever we do with that junction, we should be doing those lines because that came to us as a concern from officers. Also, Parkway, even this evening, I'm just troubled by the fact that we don't have a box junction when you're heading south, when you cross the lights at Parkway, because people cross those lines, they wait there because there's congestion on the other side, they start moving and they interact with people crossing. It's the school children for Parkway. I don't see why we haven't got a yellow box junction there. I know there are cameras that are meant to make it detect cars, but I think they're failing because I do see interaction with people crossing and cars that have been delayed in that junction.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Clark. Now, members, we do need to try and make some progress here tonight. It is getting on for 8 p.m. Next on my list, I've got Councillor Hickson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so page 9 and 10, I'm a bit confused, to be quite honest. I think it's the elements of it that are contradictory, and there are elements of it that are just absurd. So it starts off with following a meeting held on the 1st of March, so there would be a review for 12 months. Well, my maths is 12 months from the 1st of March is 2024. Is the 1st of March 2025? Am I correct?
Let me stop you there. It was 12 months following the closure, which was in September 2023.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that clears that one up. So 2.4.9 talks about a collision being due to driver error. Are you saying that some collisions are not due to driver error? Because to my mind, I think most collisions, if not all collisions, are due to driver error. But would they have actually attempted that had the junction been open? So that kind of relates to 2.4.16 at the end, where it says based on analysis. But I'm not sure that the full analysis has been done, because where has the traffic gone? The traffic hasn't just disappeared. Have you looked at traffic going down Parkway and then across onto Armstrong Road, swinging round the roundabout and going down Postley Road in order to negate the closures or the difficult situation of trying to get out of Plains Avenue? And it is a difficult situation trying to get out of that. So yeah, I mean, it's a confusing and absurd picture to my mind, and I'd be happy to have some clarity.
Barry and Lee, I don't know if you have any comments on that specific point.
Yeah, I guess, you know, it's an unfortunate truth that we're looking at the specific junction of the Wheatsheaf where you've got two major A roads diverging. Obviously, a lot of the comments earlier are around impact on local residents, as well as the local residents. We've got to think about the travelling public that are coming along there. The local residents are looking to take opportunities with the capacity that we free up, and unfortunately, that may cause them to make, you know, other travel choices where there's a path of least resistance, as it were, or a quicker way down. By forcing traffic or to make a decision to go down Parkway, we're aware of that, and obviously the comments around improvements that we'll look to make at some of those other junctions, including Plains Avenue, we'll obviously take on board. But as I say, I'll come back to the point that we're looking at obviously capacity for that major A road, and that may force decisions for other people to take other route choices. It's just a very difficult one, really.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Ash, I've got next.
Thank you, Chairman. Two things struck me. I'm looking at the Ashford Road junction with Willington Street, with a start date expected in February 2025. There's no completion time there, so I don't know how long it's going to take. The A249 Bested Road works are expected to take 13 months, so we got a time there. A start date to be made late spring, early summer 2025. I am concerned with two major road projects on the eastern side of town. When these projects initially came before us, it was stated that the Willington Street Ashford Road scheme would follow on from the A249 Bested Road scheme. They wouldn't be running simultaneously, and these appear to be going to be running simultaneously. And if you want to get into Maidstone, it's the Ashford Road, or you can go through West Street and Bested Road, and you're going to find major problems on both of those roads. If these schemes are to go ahead, I would like to see one of them delayed until the other is finished. Thank you.
Crikey, we complain that there isn't progress, and now we're complaining that we want them to be delayed. But that is a very pertinent point there. I don't know if there is any comment on the impact of potentially having two major pieces going on together.
Yes, so in terms of the phasing of the Bicester Road project, there's an initial phase which is primarily offline. So the early works will be to create the internal road and to construct the retaining wall that's east of the current access into Newnham Court. So we're expecting there will be obviously some traffic management on the road for that, but we can coordinate it with anything that's going on at Willington Street and vice versa. So we're well aware of the constraints, and indeed our streetworks team, we've already had discussions with them. They will not allow us to have two conflicting roadworks on that same corridor. The apologies, there's no completion date for the Willington Street project. We're still in discussion with our contractor, and so we don't really have an overall duration. It's probably complicated a little bit because we've got some utility diversions, and we're waiting for feedback on their programme. and duration. We also, as a challenge in terms of demolishing and rebuilding the Maidstone wall because of the working space. So we're just working with our contractor to look at the logistics of how to best carry out that work. But we will communicate programs for both projects as they come forward. But I can reassure you that we will manage the impacts of the two projects.
The risk is noted, though.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, can I just add we need to vacate the offices very shortly because the offices get locked at 8 o'clock, and I think it's gone 8 o'clock already.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I repeat my warning, if we could try to keep our comments as brief as we possibly can. I have Councillor Wilkinson next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I find the statement there is no longer the need to pull down the wheat sheaf due to Cranbourne Avenue doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of traffic reduction quite misleading. Given KCC's financial constraints, reportedly needing to save £55 million, there was probably no further need to widen the junction or pull down the wheat sheaf. Many residents oppose this idea, and I believe the Wheat Sheaf pub would make a great community asset that would benefit the residents of Shepway and the wider Maidstone area. As I have said, and many others on this committee have also stated, that many of the proposed projects in the Integrated Transport Plan have not materialised. And at a recent NBC Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we discussed trying to claw back the developer funding allocated to KCC from NBC for other projects. Furthermore, the Improvement Options Appraisal Report on page 27 indicates that closing Cranbourne Avenue has actually increased traffic on the Loose Road corridor and Plains Avenue, with peak hour volumes rising from 139 to 238 cars, a nearly 50% increase. So how does this tally with the data that says that it's an improvement? We also lack a pollution and safety report that was promised. I recommend that this report be presented to the committee before any decision on permanently closing Cranbourne Avenue. I'd like to echo the concerns of Mr. Andrew Hammersley, a Marion Crescent resident, who emphasises that no one individual should make such a significant decision without considering local residents and councillors. The JTB should oppose this decision, especially since key data is being overlooked. Unfortunately, as a committee, we do not have the powers to vote on this, so instead I wish to request the report not to be noted.
Thank you very much. There isn't actually a mechanism to not note a report, Councillor Wilkinson, but nevertheless, I don't know if there's any comment from
Please, Chair.
Thank you.
Obviously, listening to the councillor, I think it's raising the issue of actually obtaining consensus on what needs to be done. Obviously, in terms of bringing forward schemes. Councillor Clark mentioned the time period back to when the original Park and Ride sites were promoted as part of the growth deal to CELEP. We had to change and we've been playing catch up, but actually obtaining a consensus as to what the right thing should be to be done on the network. Obviously, if we can't obtain a consensus and, when we consult, unfortunately, that means that we won't be able to deliver anything. So it's a bit of a catch, really, in terms of being able to present these schemes. And obviously the board endorse what the right way to proceed should be. So I repeat, it's a very difficult situation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure it's good being last. Before I go on, I want to sort of do something very positive first. Then I'll come back to being Mr. Grumpy, and it goes with my age, Chairman. I just want to talk about Cold Harbour Roundabout because it sort of jumped in before anything else. But I have to say, although there's been quite a lot of complaints about people being stopped, you suddenly get there and this whole thing's closed, and also the trees coming down. I've been watching that job, and I have to say it's been very impressive. So I think, for one, on this scheme, well done to KCC. I think it's a brilliant scheme, and I think it's gone very well. At least we've now, the 7 that we had in our list 7 years ago, 2 will have been done when that's finished. Now, I'm going to go back to being Mr. Grumpy now. Well done to Councillor Springett and to Councillor Clark for the questions they've raised. Councillor Springett with regard to Bearsted, and I'll come on to that last. Councillor Clark with regard to the money, because basically what's been confirmed on this report, and I'm saying thank you for the officers for presenting it. It must have been quite nerve-wracking because it's a very negative report. It's about closures, things not going to happen. It's about, Howell Place, the Hall Road, Sutton Road and Willington Street. We don't know where it's going. Cripple Street not happening. And it means, hopefully, and I'll pick up on Councillor Clark's here, that there is money available, and it's why we need to know what's going on. I've never, ever, even in Bearsted Road, been able to get out what's happening to the money in the latter stages. So I think it's absolutely essential we do hear what's going on, Chairman. It's a disastrous report, really, about everything we've been trying to do for 7 years, and I'm quite sad about it. But okay, I just want to talk about Bearsted Road. When it finishes in 2026, it's going to be 6 years late. It was originally going to have to be finished to open the school. It wasn't, and it's been going backwards ever since. The first scheme had full consultation with residents and the councillors. The second scheme sort of begrudgingly had some sort of consultation with us, and it gradually changed, and then we didn't know what was going on. I will say, I'm just ask the officers one question because they're going to get locked in any minute. They'll be still here for the next meeting. When this comes back, will there be consultation with the councillors about the whole scheme, including the landscaping? And what consultation will there be with residents? Because the promises I've had in the past on numerous occasions about keeping the residents informed what's going on have never been met. Will we be getting the consultation, and will we still allow us? And please tell me this is not going to go back any further. Every time we get a report, it goes back another 6 months or a year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman. If I could pick up Mr. Chittenden's point, yes, absolutely. Obviously, we've had meetings, Mr. Chittenden, haven't we, where we've tried to describe exactly the situation we're in. We're very keen, once we have confidence of the programme and we're able to select a contractor to deliver that for us, certainly we will engage and through yourselves, ask for your support to make sure that the message is clear in terms of what those impacts are going to be through the construction, and make sure that everyone is aware through our website and through newsletters of what the intended plan will be, so that they can make accurate travel choices. And in regards to the landscape, and of course, once we've got those construction management programs and plans, we can share those with you as well. Happy to do so.
Thank you very much, and it was nice to hear Mr. Chittenden not being grumpy for once. His words, not mine. I have Councillor Jeffrey next.
Thank you. 1 point and 1 question, I think. And Councillor Springett makes a very good point earlier about severity and saturation, the new local plan. And I think it's worth remembering Maidstone Borough Council is the placemaker, and we kind of need Kent County Council to complement that. I think there is a real issue here, and we heard the officers talk about constraints and so forth. There is clearly an issue around the transport hierarchy and the principles behind it. So I do slightly worry that we're pushing forward on a transport plan that was 7-8 years ago, and it's probably a little bit behind the times. And I am kind of worried that we're putting good money after bad, and we need a substantive rethink. And I do hope Kent County council officers will work with us on building a new transport strategy. So that was my point. I wanted just to talk briefly about, I have a couple of questions on the Cold Harbour roundabout. It's obviously coming on quite quickly. There is still some flooding there, which is usually goes over the pavement and causes the cyclists and pedestrians to get very wet. Hopefully that will be fixed as part of it. There's also some problems with the lead up on the 2020 roundabout. The lanes are still problematic. They make no sense to me, and I use them regularly. My key question, though, is around the tree maintenance. The 70 trees clearly is greater than the 40 mature and vastly biodiverse trees that were lost, greater in terms of number only. Trees die, though, when they're planted, and I'd like to hear from the officers what plans there are to nurse those trees into full health and full growth, because you can plant 70 trees, leave them in the middle of the roundabout, and they will all die. And I, for one, am not walking onto the middle of the roundabout to water them.
So picking up the landscaping, under the terms of the contract with Brahini, they've got a 2-year defects period on the project. So they'll be responsible for maintaining those for 2 years. Then after that, it passes to KCC to maintain. Normally, you're looking at 3 to 5 years probably in terms of making sure there's some aftercare. So that will be passed, as I say, to Kent's landscape team to maintain following that completion at 2 years. In terms of flooding, I'm not aware of any recent issues in Cold Harbour.
Sorry, Councillor, can we just ask clarification? Was it in regards to the poppy fields as you come under the railway bridge, the flooding issue? Because we obviously the drainage plans. Yeah.
Yes,
so
it's the poppy fields bit that's flooding between the 2 roundabouts. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously that was done, completed by the developer. So we'll make, and we have done already actually, our development agreements team aware, so that can be reviewed. We're happy to feed that back to them and come back to the JTB if required.
Thank you very much for that. I've got 2 speakers left, Councillor Mr. Passmore and then Tom Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. Just not surprisingly, I'm interested in the bottom of page 11, top of page 12, paragraph 2.92, the last 2 sentences which run across onto the top of page 12. It says a review of available developer funding will be undertaken to align with local transport infrastructure funding priorities. This is with regard to the Fountain Lane. When you undertake that review, advise us as to what funds you do have, how those funds perhaps could be allocated more widely across, should we say, the Hermitage Lane corridor. And the second question is, there are some, we believe, quite simple improvements which can be made to that junction in terms of moving the bus stop further up Fountain Lane and putting in some double yellow lines down Farley Lane, which I know is in the highway improvement plan, but we'd appreciate if they could be looked at more quickly than the rest of the programme. Thank you.
Barry, I wonder if you are able to answer that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Councillor Passmore. There will be, I think you attended a meeting we had in Victor House a few months ago. So with the officer leading project manager on that. So we do plan to arrange another briefing with yourself and other councillors. In terms of the funding, this one is purely 106 funding, I believe. So I think, again, how that's reallocated if the larger scheme's not taken forward, that's something we're exploring at the moment. And with regard to some of these minor interventions, again, I think at the briefing we had with you previously, some of these were discussed, and we are looking at those at the moment to consider what is best to take forward. Double yellow lines, Farley Lane, it will present some challenges because it will impact on residents. So we need to make sure that that is the right solution. But again, any TRO would have consultation But all these interventions are being considered at the moment.
Thank you very much for that. And then the last speaker I have is Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to echo Mr. Passmore's comments. We do need to understand the funding situation for Fountain Lane. I've spoken to, I think, most officers about there was an opportunity to bid for SIL and from Maidstone Borough Council, and did that ever happen in regards to Fountain Lane? Would be a question that I'd like to know, because there's also a huge amount of development, as we know, on Hermitage Lane, and we do need to secure funding for some major improvements at both ends. I wasn't able to attend the previous briefing, but I'm looking forward to the next briefing, and I'd quite like to see, I'd like KCC to go back to basics really with some of these road schemes, including the Wheat Sheaf, like actual simple roundabouts. I think, you know, I don't know if it's ever put to you enough, but we always seem to have very complicated schemes, and actually simple roundabouts I think could perhaps solve a lot of the problems. So with this one at Fountain Lane, if we can look into more simple schemes around about taking some more space there. I know that it says within the current highway boundary, but I'd like to sort of see whether a roundabout is possible there. And then with the Wheat Sheaf, I mean, I have comments on that, but so everyone can get home, I won't go into that too much. But I do feel like the original scheme should have been continued. And I don't really understand the do minimum and do maximum. I mean, you know, at school I was always told not to do the bare minimum. So it's sort of like, I don't really understand that use of phrasing. It's sort of bizarre. But anyway, that's all I'll say for the moment.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Sorry, struggling with the mute button. Thanks ever so much. Thanks to the board members. Good evening.
Thank you for your attendance. It's nice to have some officers to talk to. Thank you.
Pleasure. We'll try not to get locked in. Cheerio.
Thank you very much. Well, that has rather concluded that item. You might get your answer on a postcard with Mr. Cannon, but I think that concludes that item. I wouldn't say nicely, but in a timely fashion. So members, that report is for noting. I appreciate that some members might not want to note it, but is that noted, members? Noted. Thank you very much. We next have item number 14, which is the Maidstone Local Bus Focus Group, which has been flying around for as many years as I've been here, almost. Tom, I don't know if there's anything you want to say that isn't already in the papers, very briefly.
Yeah, good evening, members. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick update. So it was agreed to create a local bus focus group, which is the coming out of the new bus service improvement plan from KCC, and Maidstone would be the secretariat for that group, and that was agreed in February. And we came to the JTB to discuss that. And then since February, we've had a new administration at Maidstone, and the inaugural meeting is yet to take place, but it has subsequently now been agreed that the deputy leader and cabinet member for environmental services and enforcement is to be the lead member on that, and we hope to have an inaugural meeting before the end of this calendar year.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes, just very briefly, I'm very pleased that this paper has come here to note that we are moving ahead with this. It is much needed. The engagement with bus services is essential and is requirement of the BSIP as well. So thank you, Mr. Tom, I was going to say Mr. Gilbert, for presenting this. Can I just also ask that that we do get some reports back here from Councillor English as this progresses, and also alongside that perhaps some reports on the progress against the BSIP as well, because I think the two obviously go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just some concern. Firstly, I'm great it's been here. It's taken 3 years to get it going. I think that was a shame because I think we had a great group previously. But what says me, if it's only meeting every 6 months, and somewhere here I've seen it talk about strategic only. What do you call strategic? Because I know the sort of things we used to discuss, which basically solved a lot of the problems early and kept things flowing. But if you're talking about strategic, does that mean we don't ever solve the day-to-day problems that inevitably the bus companies and ourselves as a borough council actually come across? Can you explain what do you mean by strategic?
Yes, certainly. So we take our guidance from the BSIP that KCC have created. So strategic is relating to service development and planning matters. So it's how the planning system can interact with the bus system. So could we provide funding or new bus routes? Whereas the day-to-day matters we are under the impression will be dealt with through the passenger charter groups. So that's or the punctuality improvement groups, which deal with if a service is running late, for example. So that's something that's run by Kent County Council rather than NBC in the system.
Can somebody confirm that's how it's going to be dealt with? Because that sounds like 2 different groups, but I accept that if that's where it's going to be. But I don't see it at the moment that it's going to end up there. I don't know what the passengers transport group is going to do either. Can we get some definition of what each is going to be responsible in relation to buses? It's been such an emotive subject over the past 5, 6 years. What with the cancellations from Arriva and the cutting of money from county, that I think we really need to understand that all aspects of it is being covered one way or the other. If we could have that information, please.
Yes, another place potentially to look up this is in the attached to the paper's background document. If you look at figure 2, there's a table that hopefully outlines all the different groups. But if you need any more clarity, I can provide that after the meeting. I'll have to clarify that with KCC because that's under their responsibility. So.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Clark, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think this is quite timely actually, because given the report we had earlier, my son goes to school by bus, and I will say that he goes down the Lewes Road corridor, and in the morning heading north, I cannot believe for a moment that the traffic congestion is not significantly worse than it was a couple of years ago. But I do think that the bus companies have some very rich data with their schedules and their delays. My son's school has currently got it where they're actually giving a concession to the children because they know that the network is so bad that the kids will be turning up to school 10-15 minutes late, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So I think that's telling in its own right. But I just think we've got an opportunity here, not just to take the data which is collected on the modelling, but we could also reach out through this group to get data from the bus companies to find out what's going on with their scheduling, and that might inform this group in terms of what is going on with the roads and congestion and where the hotspots are. It might be slightly different for buses than it is for the sorts of models that we do for cars and trucks. So I really hope that we can somehow bring that into this board.
Thank you very much. Right, that is another report for noting. Is that noted, members? Fabulous, thank you very much. Which, let me just make sure, that takes us on to our final item on the agenda this evening, which is the Maidstone Highways Works Programme, which is for noting. Councillor Springett. Yep, Councillor Springett.
Thank you. Sorry, I know we all want to get away. It's just could we pass back up the line? Appendix C, street lighting, replacement street lights. Where we have taken out the lovely bright orange street lights that we had and replaced them with the LEDs, which I fully understand as a cost-saving measure, the LEDs provide a significantly lower level of light than the original lights. Now, some of these lampposts are really tall. I've got an issue on the Ashford Road whereby there's a black car that parks under a street light and you can't see it because the light from the LED is just not strong enough by the time it gets to the road surface. So could they have a little think about replacing them with shorter ones? Because some of the lighting columns are very tall, and I think if we shortened them, the LEDs might better light our roads and actually our footpaths, because I think some of our footpaths are quite dark now for people to walk along. So it's just a request, could we somehow feedback? I don't know how we do it because we haven't, I don't know if Rebecca can take that. Can we have a little think about whether we want to, when we're replacing streetlights? I know we'd end up with a bit of a haphazard in some streets for a while, but could we look at making them shorter so that the lighting we are now using is more effective?
I will ask
Thank you.
I will ask the clerk if he could produce something which I could forward in my capacity as chair. If that's
it's just something I have noted. It could be my old eyes, I don't know, but I'm finding I don't see well on the roads at night, and I think it is the lighting.
We were assured that they were much better than the old ones, and one of the issues is that the light doesn't scatter, so unless it is very precisely where the light is meant to be,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, is that noted? Thank you very much. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for your time. Good night.